Hello, everyone. Good evening. And I think I'm gonna start about now. This is our first meeting. We will meet every Thursday at 7. So this evening, I will just go through just a few things, and then we'll go through the executive function skills. And then we will talk a little bit about the road ahead, what we can possibly do in the future. So just by way of brief introduction, my name is Caines-Hall. I am a teacher by profession, trained in general ed as well as special ed, and my master's is in counseling psychology. I also do coaching. I have a level 1 certificate in coaching, physical education, and I am a massage therapist as well. Our agenda for this afternoon, or this evening rather, I'll give a brief introduction to executive function skills. I thought this was the easiest place to start, as these are skills that are needed by students across the board. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about how executive function skills affect learning. We'll go into a question and answer segment, and then we'll talk about possible future topics that we can discuss. So executive function skills, what exactly are executive function skills? Well, they are basically a set of skills. It refers to a set of skills that underline our capacity to plan ahead, to meet goals, to display self-control, to follow multiple steps, directions, and even when we get interrupted, a little bit distracted, we're able to stay focused. And there are some other things included as well, which we're going to talk about as we go along. So we can think of executive function skills similar to an air traffic control system at an airport. It coordinates the plane landing, taking off, passengers moving from one place to the next without anything colliding. Everything remains safely. That is what we're looking at when we're talking about executive function skills. Now, there are about 13 components depending on what research you're looking at. And we're going to briefly talk about each one. So we can look at organization. And right away, we can actually see the benefit of this skill. Organization is just simply the ability to create and maintain systems to keep track of information. For some students in school, from as early as nursery right up to tertiary education, they have to be able to organize. They have to know where to find their material. An organization is not just the organization of their physical material, it's organization of your brain as well. And we'll touch on that later in another session. When we talk about executive function skills, we have to talk about emotional control. And that is the ability to manage our emotions, to achieve certain goals, to accomplish tasks, to control or to direct our behavior. And right away, we can see that if our children does not have emotional control, it will impact the academics as well, because they would not be in the frame of mind to sit and listen and learn. Response inhibition. When we talk about response inhibition, we are looking at your ability to you can almost ignore things around you. Oftentimes we see children in classroom and everything around, they start looking around, they start looking at it. Response inhibitions also look at your ability to think before you act. Now, someone disturbed me, I really want to punch him in the face. But is this the right thing to do? What will be the consequence of me engaging in this action? That is what we're talking about when we're talking about response inhibition. Working memory. Now, this is extremely important. We all know if we cannot remember something, then we cannot reproduce it in a testing environment or even in the day-to-day class. So when we're talking about working memory, we're looking at the ability to hold that information in your memory while performing complex tasks. And this is really important as children move from nursery to reception, right up to infants, to class 1 to 4, into secondary school and into university. For example, we may look at a third former who is just learning about Pythagoras theorem, and they have to remember the formula a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And they have to hold that in their memory, and they have to do the calculation. So a squared, we're multiplying a by a, b by b, and that will give us the c squared. They have to remember all of that. So that is what we're talking about in terms of working memory. So sometimes when children do not perform well in school, it has little or nothing to do with their intelligence. Sometimes they just need to improve their working memory. Then we can talk a little bit about sustained attention. Sorry for that typo on that one. When we're looking at sustained attention, we are talking about their ability to just focus on what is happening in the environment that they're in, that they are required to learn. So this is the capacity to keep paying attention to a task in spite of the distractions that is happening in the classroom, in spite of being bored, in spite of the activity itself not being entertaining enough. And when we have children in high schools, especially in public schools with 30, 35 persons in a class, this is really, really, really important for the child to learn. They have to be able to sustain attention. And of course, we have to talk about time management. This is one of the executive function skills that most people know about, time management. It's the ability to estimate how much time you have, how you're going to allocate that time, how to stay within the boundaries of deadlines. When we're talking about time management, we're going to have to link that with prioritizing, which we are going to talk about in a few. This one we're looking at, we're talking about perseverance. This is extremely important. If we cannot stick to a task, even when it gets difficult, then it's unlikely for us to improve, to get better. Perseverance, as we all know, is sticking to a task even when it's difficult, even when we do not want to do it. These are some of the skills that students have to have. These are the executive function skills. And weaknesses in the executive function skills generally lead to weaknesses in other areas as well. Task management. And here is where sometimes children ask about a project that they have to do. You have to break down that project. So we're looking at exactly what do we have to do? How much time do we have to do it? What can we realistically do in a certain amount of time? How do we prioritize the tasks that we have to do? And of course, planning. And planning is involved in every single one of these executive function skills. Can the child set big plans? And when you're setting a plan, this is closely linked with goal setting as well. This is what I plan to do. However, you have to look at what obstacles may come up. And if these obstacles come up, how am I going to deal with them? That way, when you start working and you encounter the challenges, you already thought about how you're going to deal with that challenge. So then you are not deterred from what you have to do. And of course, we have flexibility. And flexibility talk about your ability to revise plans in the face of obstacles. It's about when you get a setback, How do you react? When you get new information, when you make a mistake. We were all set for school today, and we were going to go into the biology lab to do an experiment. Somehow we're not going to the biology lab, we have to stay into the classroom. How does things like that affect the child when they already have a plan and the plan is so rigid that they cannot move around? Metacognition. Metacognition and self-monitoring are closely linked. Metacognition deal with thinking about your thinking. Why do I think? Why do I feel this way? What can I do differently? It's recognizing what is happening inside your mind, your body, your environment, relationship with your parents, with your peers, with your teachers, and being able to figure out how you can best adapt to suit. Best adapt to suit. That's what I was going to say. Now, how does executive function affect learning? It affects making plans. Can you make concrete plans? Can you follow through with those plans? Can you set a goal? Can you keep track of time? Can you finish your work on time? When you have to keep track of more than one thing, can you actually do that? Can you evaluate your ideas and reflect on your work? Can you change your mind in the middle of doing something? Oh, this really isn't working. What is a better way of doing this? Let me try another way. Executive function also impacts our connection. How can we connect and include past knowledge in discussions, in our writing, in whatever we're doing? And of course, this one in terms of metacognition and self-monitoring. Can we ask for help or seek information when it is needed? So we can see these are all skills that everyone needs, not only in school, but even as adults. So the executive function skills are basically all the soft skills that you need to survive and thrive in school, as well as as an adult. And the last one, wait your turn to speak. And that has to do with self-control again. That has to do with inhibition. Now, how does executive function impact writing? And here we can look at, if we are talking a little bit about writing an essay. Composition is important, and even for children who right now who is doing the 11 plus. How do they write an A essay or a B+ essay? When we're looking at composition, the essay, we are looking at the content of the writing, putting the ideas in logical order, transitioning between the ideas and between paragraphs, figuring out what content is most appropriate and what should be included and where it should be included. One of the executive function skills we spoke about is working memory. Once you have made that plan for the essay, can you follow through? Will your thoughts flow as they need to? Can you write and think at the same time? So you have all this information in your head. Now, how do you get it on the paragraph, on the paper, to get your introduction, your supporting paragraphs, your conclusion? How are you going to remember exactly what you're supposed to do with this essay? Okay, then I have to write at least 3 paragraphs. Each paragraph should contain at least 6 sentences. And for each paragraph, I should see my thesis statement or my opening statement, my supporting details, and then a conclusion. That is what we are looking at. And self-awareness, this is another skill that comes in when you are writing. As you're writing, you have to think about the organization of the content. You have to recognize when something sounds awkward. Now, this word, is this really how you spell the word? Do I need to use another word? Do I need to reword the whole sentence? So we're doing self-analysis and we're doing correcting as we are writing. So we can appreciate writing a composition is a difficult task. We have to take the letters and turn them into words. We have to take the words and turn them into sentences. We have to take those sentences and turn them into paragraphs. And that paragraph, we're turning it into an essay. And while we are doing that, we have to remember the spelling. We have to remember the grammar. We have to remember our punctuation. All the mechanics of writing come into play here. And this is why sometimes composition is difficult for students at the 11+ level, because everything that they learn in comprehension, spelling, and grammar actually bears on the composition. Now, executive function also impacts learning. And again, we can talk about working memory. Can they remember how to decode the words? And again, we are taking, they have to know letters, they have to know the letter sounds, then they have to know how to blend the letters together to come up with a word. So all of this the child is doing while they are reading. And then they have to remember their punctuation. There's a comma, I have to lower my voice. There's a full stop, I have to pause. There's an exclamation mark, I have to raise my voice to sound excited. There's a question. All of this is included in reading. So it's all of this they actually have to hold in mind while they are reading. Also, when they're reading, they have to identify main ideas in the text or the passage. So this requires them to actually keep track of individual details as they are reading. So even after you're reading and doing a reading comparison passage and you're talking about sequencing, if the child does not have a good memory, then it's likely that they won't be able to perform that task really well. When we're looking at reading and reading comprehension, they're organized. If their brain is organized, they're able to categorize their thoughts and ideas, and they're able to connect one paragraph with the next. Now we can talk a little bit about mathematics. And of course, when we're looking at mathematics, one of the executive function skills we're looking at is organization, especially when we're doing problem solving and that child has to set that problem down. Can they organize it? Can they remember the steps? If we are doing area, we're looking at the area of a triangle, working memory. Can we remember base times height divided by 2, or length times width, or pi r squared? Because the thing with area, perimeter, if you cannot remember the formulas, then you probably will not get the question correct. So they have to remember that. Working memory, tables as well, sorry. So that basically is what I wanted to introduce in terms of the executive function skills and how it affects learning. Like I said, I wanted to start with this because it applies to children from preschool right up to secondary education. Any questions, any comments? You can actually raise your hand and I'll be able to answer. Or you can type your question in the chat. Yes, please, Miss. Yes, please.
Good evening. I'm just wondering how big of a problem can this executive functioning be, and it is not understood by the parent. Obviously, most parents might not know all of these things that you just mentioned, and they might get calls from school. Well, your child is not doing this as they should, or they're being disruptive in class, or they're not focusing when they read the report. They see these kind of things that teachers may put on the report to indicate what you just said in a nutshell. But how can we help parents to, I guess, observe, recognize, and give some attention to these executive functioning skills in their children so that they can better help them at home to function both at home and at school?
That's a very good question and a comment. It's important for parents to know about executive function skills. The reason why I say that is because when we look at some of these skills where there's a deficit you can't really measure that child's true intelligence. If you have a child that is distracted, the child cannot focus. The child will not learn. That is the reality of it. So it is important for parents to actually start building these executive function skills. And it is not as difficult as we may think. For example, we can start as early as when we have a little baby. Just that child eye following you around, you're calling that child name, the child looking at you. You hold their attention for a certain period of time. By the time they get into a toddler, we play games, imaginary games with children all the time. You say peekaboo. Now you see me? No, you don't. Card games, board games. These are simple things that we can do at home. Because the interesting thing is, one of the topics we're going to touch on later is learning disabilities. And for most of the learning disabilities, we come back to these same executive function skills. We have to build the executive function skills. If a child cannot attend in school, if a child cannot sit down, then a lot of time teachers would think, oh, possible ADHD. If they cannot attend, possible ADD. But we have found that if you build these skills in children and you build them from early, then they are able to attend more in school and they are able to learn better. But this is not something that has been pushed as well as it should be. Because to be honest, you have to work with a child to be able to sit for 10 minutes and attend to what somebody is saying before you attempt to teach them math and English. Because if they're not focused on what you're saying, they're not hearing what you're saying, they are not internalizing what you're saying, they still ain't learning anything. So this is really important. And that is why I started with this, because this is something that I did with both of my children from preschool, come right up to fifth form. And now they are off at university and they are they're holding their own. Any other question?
How about if you, the parent, have those deficits too?
Both parents or just one?
Well, either scenario, because out there in households you have different dynamics. So you
Yes.
might have a household where the children might have these deficits, but the parents might also have the same deficits, or those in the same household. You might have a parent or an older sibling or somebody who typically in what would be expected, you might be, if you have older siblings or an adult, you would expect that they should be able to help the child and be able to with them and go through certain things and so on. But it's possible that there are also the scenarios where a child doesn't have that at home.
I think part of what I offer is actually workshop for parents, where parents can actually learn how to help inculcate these skills in their children. And like I said, hopefully we have two parents. So if one is better at it, then they can work through it as well. And then even the parents doesn't have these skills, it would be important for them to learn as well. So it's something that they can do with the child as a bonding experience. For example, for one of the workshops that I do, I like to do a workshop with both parents and children so that the parent can see exactly what is required of the child and the parent can help the child along. And I find this very, very effective. When parents are helped, I'm looking for a word that is eluding me now. When parents are helped so that they can help the child, because you have them for most of the time. So the parents don't have the skill, they could actually start learning the skills because it would benefit them as well, which would have an even more profound impact on the child. For example, if we're in a household that is very chaotic and the parent learned just how to plan and organize even 3 days of the week to begin with, then the whole environment becomes a lot more calm. Everybody may be a little bit a little bit happier. So if the parent doesn't have the skills, the parent can learn the skills themselves with the child, or they can learn it and then help the child along. Anybody else with a question? There may be a parent or two on this call who have attended one of my workshops. So I'm asking if any of you are here and you want to give a little 30-second speech on what you learned and how it has helped you or your child, please do, so the others could understand why building executive function in children is really important. Yes, please.
Hi, good evening. So I would have attended one of your workshops. I found it to be very helpful, especially in my situation, because my daughter is involved in several activities. And so prior to coming to the workshop, she would have missed assignment. Just even to revise was a huge challenge. And then it also helped in recognizing the type of learning that she is until attending your workshop, I didn't realize there were people who were visual learners or people who had to learn through video and stuff like that. So that all helped. And I find you've seen an improvement in her grades. She's not missing assignments anymore, and she's still managing to balance her extracurricular and academics pretty smoothly. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you also. Thank you. Excellent. So I'm going to follow on in terms of what that participant was saying. Basically, when you go to the executive function skills and when you build the executive function skills, you are able to balance, as she was saying. You can balance your extracurricular as well as the academics. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my daughter. My daughter has a learning challenge. Well, she's older, she's at university now. And these are the skills I started building in her from as early as infants B. And her saving grace has always been, as she finished primary school, moving to secondary school, onto college and university, her saving grace was she can plan, she can set a goal, she understands time, and she's self-assured enough to go and ask for assistance when she needs it. So when we're talking about executive function skills and building executive function skills, we are also looking at confidence building, knowing yourself, being able to be an advocate for yourself. I could remember she was able to get the grades to go to St. Michael's School. And I could remember she was like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do this on my own. And then halfway through the first term, when she realized it was not working as she anticipated, she was like, Mom, I need you to come to the school to speak to the teachers about my challenges. So when we are building executive function skills, that is what we are doing. We are looking at building a confident child so that they can be able to advocate for themselves. They can say exactly what their needs are. I worked at the convent for about 11 years, and I inherited a special needs class, a learning support class. That's what I call it. And during my tenure at that school, the girls that were under my care, everybody left that school with some little bit of qualification. And it was a combination of CCSLCs and the CSEC. And these are the skills that were taught daily in the classroom, every single day in every subject that I taught. Because then they understood how to study. They understood what worked for them and what didn't work. I can remember I had one young lady who was supposed to get a reader for her CSEC exam. And the morning of the exam, the reader did not show up. And the principal was trying to get her to go into the exam room to attempt the exam on her own. And she sat in front of the school hall and she refused to move, because she knew she was supposed to get a reader. And eventually the ministry sent a reader for her. So when we're looking at the executive function skills, we are looking at building the whole child. And for parents with children in secondary school, we know that there's a big difference between primary and secondary school. At common entrance level, we can get the extra help for English and math. But when they hit first form and they have English, math, science, social studies, French, Spanish, 13 subjects to do, sometimes they do not do too well because they cannot balance that. These are skills that once they learn early, it enables a smoother transition into secondary school. And it enables a smooth transition into sixth form, BCC, SJPI, UE, or anywhere they want to go in their time. That is what executive function skills does. And then it also gives them the skills they need to function as adults. Because we know the vast amount of things we have to do when we get up in the morning, especially if we have young children. We have babies, we have to bathe them, we have to feed them, we have to make breakfast, we have to pack the bag. Sometimes we have to do lunch. And all of this is using executive function skills. And for some of us, we have built it over the years, so we are able to do it. For some children, it has to be explicitly taught, or even for some of us as adults, it has to be taught. And I think the thing with me, even me learning for myself as I grew up and putting these things in place, I always have my husband to drop back on from some time to time when I cannot get everything pulled together. So once the children learn these skills, once they master the skills, once they understand themselves, they are actually going to do better. And part of the reason why I do this work is because I normally say to my students that I work with, children that I work with, it is not often, or the person who gets the best CSEC results, or the person who gets the best A-level results, is not necessarily the more intelligent person. That is the better student. For example, my daughter is naturally more intelligent than my son, but my son has always done better in school. I always say to them, for me, with a few challenges myself, I was basically 2 years behind in school. I finished fifth form at 18, sixth form at 20. While I was a year behind based on how we go to school in St. Kitts Nevis. You go at 5, so you leave fifth form at 17. In Barbados, you leave at 16. And it had nothing to do with my intelligence. Some of these same skills I'm talking about, I'm going to date myself right now. Between 96 and 98, when I was doing my teacher training at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College in St. Kitts, I was doing a project on special needs education. And I could remember Miss Cotton. My husband is listening, but I always say to people, that's the best hour I've spent with anybody in my adult life. I could remember going there and talking with Miss Cotton, and I was explaining to her a few challenges that I had. And I sat down with this special needs teacher. And after that hour, I have never failed anything after that. Because these same skills that we worked on, these things that she showed me, is what I bring back to students all the time. If they're organized, if you're confident, if you understand yourself, if you're able to delay gratification, if you're able to focus, pay attention, you will get it. You will get it. And if the students have all these skills and they're not getting it, then it's when we have to look at educational testing to figure out whether that child has a learning challenge or not. So even if you have a child who is in school and he or she is not doing well, these are some of the skills you should look at strengthening even before you go on to do an evaluation. Because I guarantee you, no matter what challenge the child have, learning challenge a child has, you will have to come back to these same skills and strengthen these skills. So that is why I've started with this area, because it applies to everybody across the spectrum, not just school children, but for us as adults as well. Any questions or comments anybody else need to know or ask?
Fortunately, I have to go to another session, but I will be back next week.
Good. Do me a favor, go to the website, sign up, and if you have any comments, any areas you want us to touch on, put it there so that I can see it and I can incorporate it as I go along. Thank you for showing up.
Good night.
Night, night, love.
Can you repeat the skills that you just mentioned?
Repeat the skills that I've mentioned in terms of what they need to work on.
Yes.
Organization skills. They have to be able to sustain attention. We talked about emotional control, response inhibition, so they actually think before they act. We look at working memory. We talk about persistence or perseverance, time management, planning and prioritization, flexibility, task initiation, self-monitoring or metacognition. I think those were the ones I touched on. And like I said, for executive function skills, depending on where you get your research, you would see different ones, but some of them, all of them actually overlap. Someone is asking about a recording. Oh, yes, you would get that information by, let's see. Okay. For this session, I'm going to actually put this information on the website. Next week, when we join, we are going to go into a bit more detail because what I want to do, this is a free forum for anyone to log into, send your questions, send your comments. This is my communities, this is my service project because I always talk to children about giving back. And as my dad used to say, your knowledge is the only thing that you can take to the grave, so you might as well share it. However, I will have a more private site as well. That will be coming later. It will be probably $30 a month. And here is where I'm going to put the extra resources that people require. So if you call for something or you WhatsApp and you say, this is what I need, I'll be able to tell you, you can go to this area in order to get that information. Because researching, doing information for specific persons actually would take a little bit of time to pull together rather than just doing this generic presentation where everybody can glean a little bit of information from. And then all this will be on the website in terms of how we will move forward. You can actually follow me on Instagram as well. I will try and post. I'm not a social media person, but at least you'll be able to see what's coming up from one week to the next. And like I said, give me some feedback so I can know what areas you guys are looking at so that we can do that as well. Anything else? Anybody need this evening? So everyone is good? No comments? No other questions? You can type it in the chat if you don't want to say it out loud. So what I want you to do, actually visit my website, look at some of the resources that we have available. Two of the resources that I have worked on, which I worked on with my children through school, is actually our homework diary and the academic planner. So you can look through, you can sift through that, you can see if it can or cannot work for your child. What I like about the homework diary is that the child can write all of his or her homework in one book. At least for me, that was designed more so for me than my children. Because there are days, if they're in secondary school, you really don't want to search through all 13 books to find out if they have homework. So it may be something that can work for you as well. Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, here is where we're going to wrap up for this evening. And hopefully I'll see you again next week invite a friend or two, go to the website, drop a topic or two in terms of what you would like me to discuss. I have some areas already based on feedback I've gotten from parents, but a few more would be good because we are going to run this segment every Thursday night at 7 until exams. Thank you very much for showing up. Your support is encouraging, and see you next week.
You're welcome. Have a
Thank
good night.
you. Have a good
Thank
night.
Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. Night, night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you for coming.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.
Bring a friend next time. Bye-bye.